I did feel that there was questions that needed to still be answered. And I wrote a letter to the Evening Mail to the Getting in Touch page, and I contacted my birth mother. I wanted so much, because I was a mom myself, I had this so much love that was, wrapped around me and my baby. And all I wanted to know was, did she love me?
Yeah.
Because why did she give me up? Because I didn't know these reasons until I did contact her. And and again, it was meant to be. We did get in contact. She did come up to the flat. It was such a...
Hey, hello and welcome to another episode of Searching for Truth. It's 2022. It's my first episode back this year, and my guest is Karen. Hello, Karen.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So, Karen, when I spoke to you, we were on the phone for about 2.5 hours, I think. I'd never spoken to you before, and that was a whopper of a phone call. And there's a lot of layers of trauma within your story from pretty much the moment you were born for many, many decades. And one of the main reasons why I'm really pleased to have you here today is because you've been through all of that. You've come through all of that. Okay, there's a few little things that are still with your health, and you'll talk about that. You've come through, but you're now using your experiences as best as you can to help others, and I love that. And I have no doubt when you share some of your story with our listeners today that you're going to help some of them. And I've no doubt with what you're planning to do later, with what you are doing, you're going to help many, many people. Another thing, a reason why I think we got on so well and we spoke so well is we've actually got quite a lot in common, albeit different. So you were adopted as well as myself. And I've always wondered what it would have been like if I'd have been adopted into my family, if I'd have been kept within the family. Because I've since found my biological family, and that, I guess, is an option. Now, with your story, I guess this is kind of where it starts for you, isn't it? When you were very young, because you were adopted, but you were adopted within the family.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, and I don't want to put words into your mouth or anything, but obviously, there's good things about that, and then there's not so negative. There's not so good things about that. So do you want to? Is that a good place to start? Do you think with the adoption?
So.
Do you think
so?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, obviously, we've got to take into account when I was born in the early 60s. So things are a little bit different now. So if children were going to be adopted within their own family as such, things would possibly be so different because the social way that we live is more acceptable. I mean, I can only give blessings, really, that the situation was that I was born out of wedlock, so to speak. My mum and dad weren't married. I think it was only a short relationship they had. And we have to take into account that my dad was still a teenager and my mum was just under 20. She was 20 when she had me. So they were fairly young, and I was a mistake. So things like this do happen, but in the 60s, it was totally different, as you can appreciate. Yeah. So I lived with my mum and her parents up until the age of 2. Then it got to a situation where it was difficult. It was difficult for my mum. She relied on her parents, she relied on her mother to look after me while she went back to work and things like that. And then there's sort of the the family started to change. My mum met somebody else. Just to let you know that at this moment in time, my father knew that I was born, but had nothing to do with me whatsoever. I just think he was too young, and possibly told basically not to interfere with the situation. However, my paternal nan, who was my dad's mother, did go and visit me, did see me on occasions, you know, birthdays, possibly, you know, treats come up on Easter time and things like that. So she was in my life, although not where I possibly knew her very well. But anyway, going back to the story, my mum met somebody else, and again, she got pregnant. Now, she had an ultimatum given to her. He was going to make an honest woman of her. However, he didn't want Karen. Karen was just not going to be in their equation, so to speak. So it got to a situation where my mum's parents, they were splitting up, so they couldn't take me on. And therefore, the only other solution was to put me into care. Now, my dad's mum, my nan, we'll call her Nan, she heard through the grapevine of the situation, what was happening. And thankfully, she was a very strong lady, very strong-willed. She knew what she wanted, and no blood of hers was going to go into care. So she took it all to the courts, to the high courts, and she got full guardianship of me. So in some sense, it was an adoption because she was seen as my mother.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 2.5, when everything had gone through legally, I went to live with my nan and my granddad, who I'd never seen, and two of her youngest children that were still at home. And at that time, they were teenagers, 15 and 17. So it was a whole new situation for me. I just barely knew this lady. I knew she was oozing with love, which was lovely.
Well, thankfully, she was oozing for love, and she absolutely, through her own, you know, wanting to do the right thing, really did this. So you're. Let me just sort of paint the picture a bit here. Then, so your biological father was in the house then when you were. So once you were adopted by your nan and granddad. So their son was your dad. How old was he at that point then?
At that point, he was 18 when I was born, so he was coming up to 20 when I went to live there.
Right.
He had to leave home. By then, he'd got engaged with another lady who's now his wife, and it was all a bit of a blow, because behind the scenes, again, this is where all the taboo came into it, is that he'd got engaged with another lady that, you know, well, a young girl, really. She didn't know that. She didn't know I existed. It all came out in a letter. Somebody sent her a letter to say, oh, do you know what, you know, so-and-so's been up to? And so it was all like a mess. By the time I'd entered this new family household, there had already been an explosion of, oh my gosh, who's coming to live with us? And I did feel that I grew up, as much as I was loved by my nan and my granddad. I do feel that I was a bit of a problem, because I wasn't to mention who my dad was. I didn't know who my dad was. You know, he'd come over at weekends maybe, but I thought he was just an uncle, you know, because the other two at home, they were seen as my aunt and uncles. I didn't understand the whole setup really for many years.
So when did, and again, this is something that I feel I've got some synergy with you, because I was adopted at 3 months old, and I had unconditional love, and still have to this day, from my parents. But because of the colour of my skin and the environment I was in, I didn't feel like I belonged. But thank goodness I had that foundation of love. There was love there. I knew that love was there. And I think it's thank goodness you had that, because what you're going to share with us now, I mean, I work a lot with trauma. A lot of the trauma actually comes from not being heard, not being listened to, not being able to speak to anybody about what's going on in your mind, why you're feeling the way you are, because that's never understood compassionately or even spoken about. That's what creates the trauma.
Absolutely.
Now, what age did you know that something wasn't right? What age can you remember when you started to feel like different?
I just felt, I mean, obviously I used to cry endlessly for my mum. Night times was a nightmare. I can still vividly remember being a child and screaming out for my mum. I wanted my mum. And as much as my nan was a comfort to me, you know, I knew that she wasn't my mum, so something was not quite right. And as the years started to go by, I was reminded, oh, your mum didn't love you, she gave you away. And that came from obviously the kids that were, my aunts, you know, the children that were, teenagers, I should say. But
cruel, aren't they? Children are cruel, aren't they? They can be really cruel.
Your mum didn't love you, that's why you're here. And so I used to try and say, well, who's my mum? Where's my mum? Why did my mum not love me? And those questions were never answered. It was like, oh, we won't talk about it. We'll wait until you're older. So as much as my nan adored me, she wasn't listening to what I needed to hear. And I just felt as if I didn't belong. When I started to recognise that my dad was this person in my life, who I had to call him by his name. And then I started to realise and put two and two together, because obviously his brothers and sisters were letting out the cat out the bag, so to speak. And as I started to catch on to, well, that must be my dad. So I started asking the question, is he my dad? And that's when it got even more awkward, because it was like, well, yes, he's your dad, but you can't call him dad. And that's it. No explanation. And to like a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old.
Yeah, he's your dad, but you can't call him dad. At 6 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And did you speak to anybody about this at 6 years old? I mean, was there anybody for you to talk to about how you were feeling, Karen, at 6?
I think whenever I showed my feelings, I was quite an emotional child, and I was always quite a poorly child. I don't know. I had every childhood sickness, illness that anybody could be afflicted with. And I was sort of it was an old-fashioned method. You couldn't be put on the sofa with the duvet over you. You had to be put in the bedroom. You're poorly, curtains closed, doors shut, and I'll come up and give you a drink in about half an hour, see how you're getting on. And that's how the regime was. You know, when I was poorly, I was put away in this room. And I did feel I was very, very lonely. So even when I asked the questions or tried to ask the questions, it was like, it was never the appropriate time. It was like, just go away. I just felt like, go away. And, you know, we'll talk to you when you're a little bit older and you can understand. So my going away was to take myself to my room and be on my own. And I do feel that I had a lot of time on my own, and I didn't really feel close enough to anybody to ask questions. And if I did, I think I might have just been told not to. So
Yeah.
it was very much suppressed. My emotions were suppressed.
I think
at a
until
very
I think
early
the
age.
60s and the 70s, and obviously probably before that as well, without a doubt, it just wasn't, you just didn't talk about stuff, did they? The older generation, and were
No.
really conditioned to just, no, we don't go there.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that. And that, and in a way, I feel close to you as well when you talk about being on your own in your bedroom. I used to recluse to my own bedroom a lot and daydream a lot, just in my own head, just make up fantasies and stories in my own head, because it was far better than what was going on in the outside world. But it was quite a very lonely experience. Now, for me, what that did is that chipped away at my self-esteem. And then that had an effect on my teenage years, because I felt, you know, now I realize I'm actually, and probably was when I was born, a very confident person, quite confident, outgoing. But because of what happened to me, I went inwards and probably walked down with my head down. And that's why a lot of other things seem to happen to me now, I realize. Maybe because my head was down and I was so low on self-esteem, which is so sad, Karen, because when you look at it, it's not, none of this is your fault. None of this is the child's fault, but yet your self-esteem, which then can lead to more trauma, which we'll talk about in your case, it was never your fault. It was never should have happened. And it sounds to me as though you were such a sensitive, loving girl, and you know, you would have been a mommy's girl. You would have probably been clinging to her for, you know, that's the nature of you. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm listening to this, and other people will be like, you know, that's, you shouldn't have had to have gone through that and on your own.
Yeah.
So
But it did not knock my self-esteem. And as you say, I was bullied at school, right from early infant school, all through my schooling, hated school. And it just followed me from junior to senior. And I just feel it was because my self-esteem, I wasn't confident in myself. I didn't feel, I knew I was different, but I couldn't quite put my finger on the reason why I was different, you know. And the more hurt I got, and although, you know, I used to go home after being bullied and possibly my clothes were torn, and, you know, I had a few scrapes on me, and my nan would be up at the school the next day, but that didn't help. As much as she was helping in the way that she could, she wasn't building me up to face the world, as cruel as the world could be, because in her book, you know, she was still trying to mollycoddle me and give me the best that she could by, I say, wrapped up in cotton wool, because she didn't want the real stories to start to hit me. But that's not the way for children to be brought up. They need to know the truth from the outset. And I can see it now, what she was trying to do. She was trying to protect me, but she overprotected me to the point where I started to get quite resentful in my teenage years. And rebellion sets in.
And that is where, it can really affect the rest of your life, or certainly a lot of your adult life, during the teenage, adolescent years. I definitely can relate to that. Just before we talk about that, there's something that you said about your story at school. There was something that you said, and I hope you don't mind you sharing this, but you shared it with me, and it's really stayed with me. Something that you were obviously called, and then you said at school, not knowing that what it was bad, because it was just something that was said. Are you okay to share that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this was an early age. I was in the infant school. I was possibly around about the age of six or 7, maybe.
Well, infants is 4 or 5. Infants is like 5 years old. Really.
So it was very early. So and I remember in the playground, I was just playing with my friend, you know, and she must, you know, tugging and chasing and goodness knows what. and I called her a little bastard, and quite oblivious to what I'd said, because that was the terminology that was used in the household towards me.
So
And
until that point, and obviously you got into trouble or told off for that, did you? Or
I did. Obviously my friend went running to the teacher, and when we got into class, I was told off and made to stand in the corner, as we did, with our back towards the class. And then I think a letter might have been written, because I remember it going back home and having the conversation at home with, well, I didn't know it was a bad word, but nothing was said again. It was dampened down. But yeah, the little bee.
the little
And
bee.
yeah.
Oh,
and as I
bless you.
started to get older, I'd got it thrown in my face about my mother, and it would be like, oh, you can't do that, or you can't say that, you're just being like your mother, you'll end up like your mother. And
Did
I
you
used to
remember
think,
your mother? Did you remember? Because you were 2.5, were you, when you left? Did you have any?
No, the only thing that I could remember about my mum was that she had jet black hair. Jet black hair, that's all I could remember. And it was in a beehive, the 1960s.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything more, because nothing else was said. But obviously, if I'd done anything wrong, it was like, oh, you're just like your mother. And I thought, well, how could I be like, well, I don't know. So
Yeah. Karen, when I was growing up, adopted, obviously, the same as you, I longed for my birth mum. I longed and longed and longed, and I did have a photo of her, and I remember that, no, I didn't have a photo of her, but I longed and longed for a photo of her. I used to imagine a photograph of her. And I think with a mother and daughter, especially, there can be a connection, a real freaking connection, that when you pull those two apart, you as the child, certainly myself, I felt it. I felt that there was a connection there. Did you feel that? Did you feel a longing for your birth mum? Did you feel a connection?
I still longed for her. Obviously, I grew out of the crying, but I knew that I felt empty inside. I did feel that I didn't quite belong or fit into this family. So I spent a lot of time upstairs in my bedroom doing my own thing. And I used to obviously daydream about her, meeting up with her. I didn't know what she looked like. I thought maybe I looked like her. And in some way, I know that I do now. But back then I had no idea of what she actually did look like. I didn't have a photo. I think that was quite cruel. I think I should have had photos so that we could have talked over the photos and reminisced, so that it wasn't just something that you tried to, erase from a child's memory, but to sort of cherish and say, this was your mom and she loved you very much. But that wasn't the way it was. It wasn't the way.
It wasn't the way in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. It just was not the way to do that. Yeah. So okay, so teenage years, what were they like for you, Karen?
Well, let's say I couldn't wait to grow up. I just wanted to grow up really quickly. Didn't really want school. I was quite a clever girl, but I didn't enjoy school, so I didn't do as well as I could have done. I used to, obviously, it was easy for me to have time off school, because I used to just sort of say to my nan, oh, I don't feel very well today. And it would be, oh, okay. I think she just liked my company. By this time, obviously, the other two in the family had possibly left home, got into relationships themselves, got married. My granddad passed away I think I was about 6 or 7 when he passed away. So it was just me and my nan. And I could wrap around my little finger and yeah. I mean, as much as I loved her and I did respect her, she was a very strong lady, as I mentioned, very strict, but very loving. So there was part of me that was a little bit scared of her. I think I grew up being a little bit scared, but I knew that she was loving, but she never used to give me the right answers that I needed. I mean, especially as you start to grow up and go through puberty. I mean, I didn't know what was happening to me. And those are awkward years. Teenage years are awful. And, you know, as I know, as a mum myself, you know, give me babies anytime, but as they start to grow up, goodness me, they're more of a handful. But yeah, I just felt that I wanted to grow up too soon. And in my head, I dreamt of just leaving home, having babies of my own and having my own family. You know, it was just, The Birds and the Bees was given to me in the book. It was like a book about, oh, I don't know, it was very medical. And I was handed a big pack of sanitary towels for when the day would come. And I'd think, well, what day? I don't know what this day is. So I wasn't being very prepared for the big wide world. And of course, when boys started to, or I got interested in boys when I was about 14, it was very much, because I was a bit of a tomboy. So it was very much, you know, just playing on your bikes, going out over the park, riding bikes. There wasn't too much into it. But again, there was nothing to tell me any differently to being prepared of the opposite sex or anything like that. However, by the time I was 14, I was starting to being accused again of being just like my mother. And I thought, where does this come from? And my nan started reading my diaries, because I've always kept like journals, because I think that's a good thing to keep your emotional self, you know,
Yeah.
write these things down. So I did that from an early age, really. And she actually started reading a diary, and I'd put about this, my first love actually, about my first kiss, and she took it completely out of
Context.
context.
Yeah.
And oh yes, I was a little slag. So again, I was very confused teenager, growing up with my peers, learning from them. I had no mentor as such. And then obviously learning the wrong things in life pretty quickly.
This is how it was back in the day. And I just call for anyone that's listening to this that can relate to this in this era. So we're in the 70s now, aren't we? As you're a teenager going through adolescence. And just stepping back from that a little bit, I think, because what happened to me is when you've had this sort of trauma, what you want to do as you get older is you want to run away from it. So you just want to get away from being a child as quickly as possible, so you can just put that behind you. But inevitably, because of the lack of support, empathy, and love in some cases, that's a really hard thing to do.
It certainly is.
It's a really hard thing to do. And also you do it with your head on, thinking that you're doing the right thing. But most of the time, like in my case, everything I did was actually probably the wrong step for me. But I was so determined to kind of get away my way that, you know, I did create that destruction, but only because I didn't feel I had the guidance to help me go forward. I hadn't had, so I feel if anyone out there can relate to this era, because I think, wow, how hard is that? Where, I mean, you're called a slag. Your grandnan's probably thinking about your own mum and just living in those days. But how on earth are you? You're told, given a book on the birds and the bees, a pack of sanitary towels, and told to wait for the big day. I mean, what on earth is that? Talk about, you know, and obviously, you know, you at that age, you're getting stirs of things happening anyway, you know, attraction to boys and stuff. but with no guidance. Again, Karen, again, this and anybody else out there, hopefully you realise now, none of this is your fault. None of it.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you are still just a child. You're just, and it's just, but the thing is, and I know you're going to share some more now, we don't know that at the time. We feel bad. I don't know about you. I felt bad. I felt incredibly bad inside. I didn't feel worthy. I felt I was to blame for everything. So with that, I carried a huge amount of shame as well. And obviously, when you do start getting into the sexual side of things, when you're 14 or 15, because you know no better, you carry even more guilt and shame.
Absolutely. And I carried that for quite a while, really. Yeah, because although I hadn't been doing anything wrong as such, on that particular relationship, she called a halt to it. She'd gone round to his parents, blamed him for making, well, she just blew it all out of proportion. So obviously his father was very angry for the accusations, but I wasn't accusing anybody because all we did was kiss. And I think I'd put in my diary, he kissed me and I liked it and I wanted more, or something like that. So obviously it was all read very wrong. And yeah, so what did I do? I was 14 and went up to my bedroom and I cried my eyes out and I didn't come out for days. I think I had meals literally booked to the bedroom door because I wouldn't come downstairs and I wouldn't go to school and I wouldn't do this. And I just cried and cried and cried, and I just, started to resent the fact that I was, just not being listened to.
So what happened next then for you? When did you leave? What happened?
Well, a lot of things happened. By the time I was 15, obviously my teenage years got worse, to the point I was just, I'd found another circle of friends that I felt comfortable with, started going out, partying, staying out. I shouldn't have been doing that at the age of 15.
You can't, I mean, yeah, but I can totally understand why you were, because I was doing it as well.
Yeah, well, this is it. You get to a certain age and you think you know everything. You don't. You haven't got that. You haven't got that sort of experience or knowledge behind you, but you're going out there experimenting. And I experimented with drink, I experimented with smoking, and I started experimenting with boys. So,
yeah. Smoking, drinking, and boys.
Yeah.
I think those three things there, especially when you're looking at trauma in the past or events like what you're talking about, I think a lot of people can relate to those three things at 15 years old. I'm sure. I know I can, and I'm pretty sure there's many more, hey? So is there any, what can you share about that? What can you share about that time, Karen?
Well, there's a lot I could share, and I will share something that not many people do know. And I don't think I shared this with yourself when we had that conversation. But when I was 15, I was actually raped by an older boy. Well, it was a man. He was 21. I was 15. And he was a friend of a girlfriend I knew in Rubery. And she was a bit older than me. She was about 18 as well. But we used to, I used to chill out, hang out with them. And I used to think, wow, she's got this lad and why can't I have a whole older older man in my life, you know? And I used to daydream about that. But I came across him one night. Me and another girlfriend was out for a drink, and he was with his mates. They said that they were going to a party, and I asked him about my friend, you know, his girlfriend. I said, oh, is she coming as well? He said, oh, she'll already be there, and she'd be good to see you. And we went back to this boy's, well, I say boy, I keep saying boy, but obviously young men. Went back to this house, and there was no party. So there were 6 lads and me and my mate. And yeah, and he took me upstairs. He didn't realise I was a virgin, because obviously I was quite a cocky little character. I felt that I knew everything, and, you know, maybe flirted and goodness knows what. So with whatever happened between us, I did lay the blame on me. I didn't realise it was rape back then. I kept saying I was scared. I said I want to go back downstairs with my friend. They were eating tea and toast, and, you know, put some music on. I wanted to go downstairs and listen to the music, but no, he had his way as such. And I thought, oh my God, is that what it's all about? It was absolutely horrific and horrible, and I couldn't wait to get out of the house quick enough. And yeah, and just sort of be jeered and laughed at. And he said basically to his friends, oh, she was a virgin. So he should have been more ashamed of the fact that I was. But I'd got no one to be consoled by. My friend was absolutely horrified. You know, she was crying as much as I was crying. And she kept saying, sorry, sorry. And I said, well, it's not your fault, you know, it's my fault. And I kept that for many, many years, because I'd got no one to tell. No one to tell, because if I'd gone home and told my nan, it would have been all my fault anyway, because that's what she expected of me. That's what she'd already thought of me. So how
old were you?
I was 15.
So you were still a child. So really, it should have been the police, really.
Absolutely. But I kept stum, and me and my friend kept it a secret between us for many, many, many years. Wow. So at that point then, it was like, well, you know, it had happened. By the time I was 16, I thought, okay, I did fall in love with another boy. Wanted to run away with him. Did for 3 weeks, and then came home because my nan kept saying, oh, I need you home, I'm not well, and you're putting so much worry on me. So I did go back home, and then I just thought, you know what, I just want to leave home. I want to just get my own place. I was working. By the time I was 17, I was working. I'd got a job. So I did start to feel quite independent. But all I wanted was a baby. I was so desperate for a baby. But in my mind, if I had a baby, I had this unconditional love, and I was going to be such a loving mother and be able to, you know, just create my own family.
You basically almost rewrite the story that you didn't. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do, isn't it? A lot of very young mothers do want to get pregnant so that they can feel that love that they never had, or give that child the love that they never had. So it's totally understandable. So how soon was that then? I mean, you know, you were 17, well, you had a job, like, you know.
Yeah, it didn't really happen. I mean, I did leave home, or possibly it was about 17 and a half. I'd met somebody else. Didn't particularly love him, but he was very keen on me. And I got a flat, and before I knew it, he'd moved in. He didn't sort of consult me. It was just the done thing, move in with your girl. And yeah, he basically proposed to me. Wow. So when he proposed to me, more or less, we got married when I was 18, and I thought that was the best thing to ever happen, because I wasn't going to be living in sin as such. I wasn't going to be this, you know, I'd have my husband, I'd have my babies, and we'd be happy ever after. And unfortunately, I got caught up in a very abusive, very possessive, very traumatic time in my life, where yeah, I didn't know how, again, I didn't know who to run to, I didn't know where to turn to, but I'd bitten off more than I could chew, basically, because he was just awful. I can't really say.
You don't have to, Karen. Karen,
Yeah,
you don't have to. You don't
I just
have
felt
to.
that I was imprisoned in this relationship, and I didn't see a way out, because I'd got myself into it.
Well, the signs were there, really, I suppose, when you look back. He just moved in, you didn't even invite him. You were getting married, that was a complete surprise. So those signs are pretty strong, I guess, when you look back, of someone who's very possessive, potentially abusive. You don't have to go into the details, Karen. You did share with me, and it was horrific what happened to you, and I think that's all that needs to be said. It was horrific. It shouldn't happen to anybody, and it did. But the good thing is you are here now. So tell us about how you sort of skirt. So the fly keeps landing on my forehead. I don't know if you see it, but just sort of, what sort of happened after that? It was sort of after. You obviously got out of that relationship.
I did get out of the relationship. Feared for my life, really, because I think that's what his intent was, basically, to do away with me. But I did manage to get back to my nan's. The night I did that was very traumatic, because I will share again. I will share this, because really and truly, it's nothing to be embarrassed about, because I didn't go down that road. But he basically wanted to become my pimp, and he wanted to put me out there so that he could get money that way.
Yeah.
We lived in an area where it was rife. My neighbour, who was a very lovely girl, and a husband, I think he was her husband as well. He was lovely, and I had a little child, and I was so envious because they'd got this little girl. And when I found out that she was actual prostitute herself, and her husband was her pimp, it was like, wow, is this what it's really all about? But there was something inside me that kept telling me, no, you don't go to those depths. Even if you're beaten black and blue, and trust me, I was beaten black and blue. And it's when he took me to a place and left me with the so-called lady of the house. People would call her the madam. And she looked at me and she said, what on earth does he think you're going to, what are you here for? What does he think he's doing, leaving you behind? And she more or less said to me, you're not cut out for this. Is there anywhere you can go? And I said, I can catch the last bus home to my nan's. And she gave me the bus fare to go. And
thank God. Thank God. Yeah. Because you know, and I know, and everyone knows, that if that could have gone a completely different way, she could have been someone that was so different to that, and you're like, well, I don't think you'd be here talking to me right now, because of the destruction that life would have likely led. Wow. So
so that
got the bus, you went back to your nan's.
Yeah. And to be honest,
I didn't tell my nan what had happened, but
she'd seen many a black eye, and she's, you know, she knew that I'd been in and out of hospital. So she basically said, right, this is it now. You're here to stay. But I didn't stay very long with her, unfortunately. I did move on. And but yeah, that was my one way to get out and press charges. Well, not press charges about him being a pimp, but press charges about him beating me up, yeah, and being aggressive and stalking me at work, just my whole entire life. I used to have to come down the fire exit after work because I knew he'd be waiting outside at the front gates. It was absolutely horrific, and that was 2 years of hell, really, that I just didn't need. But goodness me, if I was brave enough to write a story about that alone, it would be, I think it would be a bestseller.
I think it would be as well. Sometimes it's just too painful, though, isn't it?
It's too painful.
Yeah.
Even now, after all the therapy that I've had, which we'll possibly go on to, but yeah, I've dealt with it, but I can't write about it.
Well, let's just talk about that, because obviously you were craving for a baby. I'm right in saying you didn't have one with him, right? Or did you?
I did get pregnant, but because of the abuse, and he beat me up so badly, I did lose the baby. But I wasn't that far into my pregnancy. I think I was only about 12 weeks.
Right, okay. So, I mean, that's, thankfully, I think you didn't have a baby with that, in that relationship. But you did eventually, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes.
So let's lighten it up a little bit. Tell us about that. Tell us about the baby that you were craving for, eventually got. Well, when did that happen? What happened?
Yeah, this is in my book, actually, because it is a beautiful story. I met somebody that was a lot older than me. He was 9 years older than me. So sensible head. Treated me like a princess. You know, we'd go out dancing, and you know, I was the, you know, his lady on his arm, so to speak. And he made me feel like a lady, and that was the first time in all the relationships and that I felt that I was something special. And he actually said to me, which is quite strange, because he knew I wasn't taking birth control. And he knew how desperate I was for a baby. And he actually said to me, when you find love, that is when love will begin to grow inside you. And I thought that was so beautiful, beautiful words. However, when I did become pregnant with my beautiful daughter, I skipped down the road. I went to get a pregnancy test at the advisory centre, and when it came back positive, oh goodness me, I was overjoyed. Got on the bus, number 11 bus that sort of takes you around the circuit, skipped down the city road and down to a new flat where I was living. I couldn't, you know, rejoice anymore. I was pregnant, I was having a baby. But unfortunately, when that came onto his ears, he turned around and says, no, it can't happen, not yet. And I kept saying, but why not yet? You said when love happens, love will start to grow. And that's when the story came out about him. He was already in a relationship. I was so naive. I couldn't see that. He'd already got a child. And he basically said, no can do. And you know what? He gave me an ultimatum. And that was the ultimatum that I'd learned, you know, finally learned my story about my birth mother, about the ultimatum that she had. We've got to take into account, I'm 20 at this time. I had it just after my 21st birthday. I've got no family. because of my marriage and because of me sort of doing what I was doing as such, the shame, the blame, the whole family network had been broken. My nan, unfortunately, was going through, well, early Alzheimer's, but we didn't know it was that back then. So she was going into a residential home, and I'd got no family to fall back on. I'd got no brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, dad, mum, nan. I'd got nobody. So my friends, my network of friends were basically the crux of it all. And yeah, and it was round about this time that I'd started to grow with my faith as well. I'd got this spiritual faith because I just felt that there was always something inside me that was being like a guardian angel. And I didn't feel scared. I was just too overjoyed. Maybe I was a little bit naive, but I was overjoyed. I was having my baby, and that's all that mattered in the whole wide world. It's my world.
I love this. I love this. And your relationship with God has continued as well, hasn't it? Have you've your relationship?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just feel that God was there all the time. It's just that I just didn't know, not being brought up in a Christian background. I didn't know anything about God or faith. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Christian background. There was just nothing there. But inside me, even as a child, when I look back now, I think, gosh, for the grace of God, that time when my ex-husband took me to that house, there goes for the grace of God, goes I, because goodness me, things could have been so different.
Yeah.
And I wanted to dedicate my daughter to God. I just had this feeling. I wanted her christened. I hadn't been christened. I wanted her christened. But then as I got into the church, I realised that it wasn't so much a christening, it was a dedication, because it was a gift from God. And that's what really cemented that belief within me. God was there looking after me, and he'd given me this gift.
And how has that changed for you over the years, knowing that God was always there and is now with you? Has that, I mean, I know we'll talk before we finish this about what you're doing now to help others with your experiences, but once you sort of realised that God was there and you had your daughter, how were things thereafter for you?
Things were okay, but I think I did a silly thing, but I can't say it was silly. It was just the course that it had to go. Because I was in like a nice circle of friends.
Yeah.
I fell in love too easily. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be cherished. And I fell for a friend. And maybe we should have just stayed friends, but it didn't happen. And I got pregnant again. But, and again, it was the same cycle. It's like, oh, can't do this. And ran away, sort of, more or less. Well, didn't run too far. But, yeah. But at the same time, it was around before I was pregnant with my son, it was around the time that my daughter was about 1. I did feel that there was a void in my life. I did feel that there was questions that needed to still be answered. And I wrote a letter to the Evening Mail, to the Getting in Touch page, and I contacted my birth mother. I wanted so much, because I was a mum myself. I had this so much love that was, wrapped around me and my baby. And all I wanted to know was, did she love me like that?
Yeah.
Because why did she give me up? Because I didn't know these reasons until I did contact her, and yeah, and again, it was meant to be. We did get in contact. She did come up to the flat. It was such a surreal meeting because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who behind that door was going to be.
Let me just set up the scene a little bit here, because we've kind of snuck on into this, which is it's huge. Meeting your birth mother is just massive for me, because I never met mine, and I never will, because she's passed, but I always wanted to, and that was all I was really desperate to do as a child. It's like, I want to meet my real mum. So the last time that you saw her, obviously you don't remember seeing her, you were just a toddler, and you knew nothing. But you obviously knew that she was still alive because you were reaching out. So did you have information about her throughout, any information throughout growing up from anyone, or that she was still alive?
The only information, I didn't know whether she was alive or not.
Okay.
The only information that I had was the road and the area that I was born, the hospital I was born in, and her full name as a maiden name. I didn't know who she was as a married woman. That's all I had.
Okay.
So that, obviously, a little letter went to the evening mail saying, do you know, I'm her daughter. I was born on such and such, used to live at such and such, and that's all I could go by.
And you got a response?
I got a response.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the feelings that must have generated in you.
Yeah.
I mean, as an adoptee, wow.
Yeah. Well, the response came initially from her mother, and she sort of, because she phoned me, because I'd obviously left my telephone number and my address, and she phoned me and she quizzed me over the phone. She was quite abrupt, actually, asking me, well, why do you want to know after all these years? I mean, I'm 21 now, and we're talking like 18, 19 years have gone by. Why? Obviously I should understand that my mom has moved on. She's married. She's got other children, and what was my plan? Was my plan to upset the apple cart for her? And all I simply said was, no, it's because I've become a mom myself, and I've got a little daughter who's her granddaughter, and I so much long to meet my mom so that I can ask questions, because I can't ask questions to anybody else. Only she can answer.
And what did you get? What response did you get from her when you said that?
She seemed to be okay with that.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. I mean, what can she say to that? She's obviously there, like, you're going to accept the apple. I'm having a baby. I bet that straight away would have just been like, because then this was your grandma, right? This was her mum. So you've just told her about her great granddaughter.
Yeah.
Her granddaughter.
She didn't really want us, to be honest.
Oh.
So I didn't sort of, she said she'd go back and have a chat with her to make sure that my mum was comfortable with everything. And we made a plan that it was going to be a Sunday tea time, you do your cups of teas and a bit of cake. And she'd come round, and that's when we did our first meet after so many years. So I saw the car draw up from the front windows, and I could hear her footsteps coming up the stairwell. And I just remember standing behind that door, knowing that she must have the same feelings of emotion standing on the opposite side. Because what do? Do you caress? Do you say, oh, love you? Do you say, hi, mum? Do you say, use her name? You just don't know what to do. And when I opened the door, I did feel like I opened the door to a mirror. I could see me in her.
Wow. What did you do?
Yeah.
So what was the first thing you did or said?
Well, we didn't caress. We didn't hug. I didn't call her mum. I never did, really. But we you know, I told her to come in, told her to, you know, I was excited. She was nervous and excited. So yeah, we just sat next to each other on the sofa, chatted. I asked my questions. Obviously, I'd got a baby sleeping in the cot next door, so I couldn't wait for her to meet her granddaughter. And yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but it was lovely. And I didn't feel scared of asking her, because you've got to remember, all through the years of asking questions, I was always sort of told, oh, when you're older, but though nothing ever really materialized, and never knew a story other than, you know, it was just a whirlwind relationship that had obviously bought me, conceived me. But she told me from her perspective of things. And yeah, as a mom, I could have easily said, well, you know, I don't, you know, I don't wash with that. I don't think you should have done that. But no, I listened. I took in what she told me and the reasons what she told me. And she said to me, I tell you now, I felt that I was doing the right thing. It tore me to bits, but I was doing the right thing because I knew that you'd be loved and you'd have a good upbringing with your nan. But really and truly, I should have said, oh, but you didn't know I was going to be adopted by her. I could have been placed into care. But I didn't want to quiz her. I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. But it was when she was talking about her husband, and I do believe that they're still together. Apparently he was quite violent to her. So looking back at the life story that she could tell, I was well out of, I had, out of the two options, I was in a better, you know, life, because I would have been his punch bowl. Easy.
Well, he didn't want you, did he? He didn't want you.
He didn't want me.
Wow.
But at least he was on at the beginning and said, there's an ultimatum. I went, I don't want Karen. I don't, you know, I don't want a reminder of another man. So at least he was honest with her, but he gave her a life of hell. And she, you know, it was a shame.
There's a cycle here, isn't there? There's a cycle. There's a cycle, and who knows what the cycle is with her parents and her parents' parents, but you certainly know the continuation of it. The cycle's continued, even though she didn't bring you up. It's a generational, maybe ancestral cycle. Which, do you think you've broken it, Karen? Do you feel?
I'd like to think I've broken it, because I've seen my children and how grounded my children are, and I'm so proud of them. I'm proud of myself being a single mom, bringing them into this world, and, you know, seeing where they're at. And you know what, my two eldest, they are loving parents. They are, well, I'm being biased now, they're the best parents out. But you know, my grandchildren, you just see that they're stable, they're happy, they know what family is, the real meaning behind family.
And you've done that. You've done that. You've broken the cycle, and you've done that. And I bet it's an absolute joy having your grandchildren over.
Absolutely.
But what I would like to talk about is what you're doing now, because you are not wallowing. Obviously, you're not wallowing in your experiences. You've done a great job bringing up your children, and they're now doing great jobs bringing up their children. So but you're also now wanting to reach out to others, because you've had decades of this trauma and feeling alone.
Well, I mean, for over a decade now, I've always felt that I can give something back. You know, I didn't have these life experiences for nothing. It has caused trauma in my life, but I do feel that I've got so much experience and knowledge. I've practiced NLP. I've done it for my own self-development. I'm a practitioner in mindfulness and hypnosis. I'm also, you know, there to support anybody. And I thought, well, what way to support? I always thought by the time I'm 60, I've got a book to write. So I've started putting a book together. It's just sort of from my journal, really, memories. It's not like a storybook as such. It's just snippets of where I've been, where my faith has built me up, where I have learnt things the hard way, but how I've seen how coming through it, the tools that I've put in place to support me. And it's all those sort of tools and knowledge and experiences that you just think, you know what, this can help somebody else. Life is hard, you know, whether you're adopted or not, life is difficult, and childhood traumas, you carry that. You know, it's the hidden stress that we carry, and it sometimes doesn't start to evolve and show its ugly head until you're actually in relationships yourself.
Yeah.
And I just feel that, yeah, I'm ready now to support and help others. That's where I want to be.
You are a real somebody that really somebody could really learn from you, Karen, your story. And just the layers, if you don't, I think it's quite, it seems obvious when you're looking at it, but it's not obvious when you're in it, that if you don't stop this now, it's just going to carry on. And whether you can actually see it going on inside on your health, it is just going to carry on. I mean, I don't know too much about your health issues, but I do know with myself that through trauma in my 20s, I started getting effects from my nervous system. So I started getting like these shakes and shivers all over my body. Now I had no control of it. That was coming from the inside. So for me, it's like, wow, you know, what else can be having a massive impact on our health, on our nervous system, that's an impact from our trauma, really? Because I've learned a lot now that these things are all going on, and unless we know or do anything about it, it's going to have an impact with us in later life.
Yeah, I mean, my health has been a bit of a journey as well, a separate sort of journey. When I was in my 30s, I was taken really poorly. I couldn't walk. I was in so much pain. My spine, my legs, everything was affected. And it was very acute. It was very sudden, and it happened and lasted for a couple of weeks, but it sort of knocked me about. And initially they were looking at, I was under the hospital, and then we were looking at possible MS. And I was diagnosed in 92 with benign MS. However, as times went by and, you know, I sort of got myself a little bit better. I was back out dancing and clubbing and doing everything that a 30-year-old would do. It did have a bit of a knock on in my health, and I was back under the hospital again. And they found that there was no plaques as such in the nervous system or in the muscle system. So they couldn't call it MS. So they called it fibromyalgia. Now, this was new back then in the 90s, fibromyalgia. It was like, but you know, there's an epidemic of it, absolute epidemic. And when you say about the central nervous system, that's what stems it. And I do believe it's when you're broken. Yeah. When you've been broken, it affects you.
Yeah.
And it affects you right down to the core. When it actually hit me hard was when I was 50, because I had to have a hysterectomy. I'd suffered with periods and fibroids and goodness knows what for a good while, and it was the quality of life that I wanted. So I went for a full hysterectomy. That put me into a clinical menopause, which I wasn't prepared for. Again, no one had prepared me for it. Didn't know about HRT, wasn't put on it for a good couple of months. So crawling the ceiling and goodness knows what. But apparently with your hormone imbalance and everything else, because your hormones are important to everything really, the cycle of your body and the balancing, just threw everything out. And I was diagnosed about two years later by a private doctor, because it was so severe. I couldn't think, I couldn't do stuff. I felt disabled without being disabled. That makes sense. It was like my brain fog, hot, cold, couldn't really go to work half the time, couldn't really, I don't know. Yeah, I was just completely thrown. So I went to this private doctor who was absolutely excellent. She'd done bloods and goodness knows what. And it came back that I'd got ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. And to be honest, I've gone on a diet. I went on special diet. I was also gluten intolerant, so obviously gluten was out of my diet. I'm now lactose intolerant, so dairy is out of my diet. So I'm very much more vegetarian, but I do have chicken or turkey. Supplements galore, but there was just nothing really to bring back this energy. And I'm still struggling today with it. I have good days and I have bad days. But unfortunately, where I am at the moment is that because I'm a fighter, and I think when you know the history of where I come from, I'm a bit of a fighter. I'm very rebellious, even against this horrid illness. I still tend to push myself, and maybe push myself too hard sometimes. And it's having its toll on my heart. So I'm under a cardiologist at the moment, but back under the rheumatologist and also the immunologist. So I've got everybody looking after me. And it's just about, Karen, taking a step back, pacing yourself, because, you know, maybe there's certain things I can't do anymore. I know I can't dance from dusk till dawn, but at the end of the day, I can write and I can speak and I can do beautiful poems, and, you know, and I can help other people.
You have seen Kim as well. So Kim has told me about you, and you've come through Kim. So obviously that a while back you saw Kim and had some energy work or something. Could you just tell us a little bit about how that helped you, Karen?
Absolutely. Well, I'm very much into this self-help and acupuncture and holistic medicines, because I have come away big time from the westernized way of medications. Believe it or not, I don't take any medication other than antihistamine now and again. The other way is very much mindfulness, and I do believe in energy therapy. And a friend of mine, Kim, our friend, she's so, well, I just think she's so brilliant at what she does, talented in every way. But she does the quantum energy therapy. I had it many years ago. I can't remember how many years ago now. But goodness me, from the outset, just lying there feeling so peaceful, letting her do what she has to do. I'd say it was a little bit like Reiki and a little bit like acupuncture, because she touches the points, but it's marvelous. It's just absolutely marvelous, because you come out of it so refreshed. And somebody with fibromyalgia, to say that they feel refreshed is saying something. So the first episode, she actually found that there was a lot of areas around my body at certain points, especially down by my, I think it was my spleen and my liver points, where she had to really do some work and pull out this negative energy. And although she's not touching you, you can actually feel the pull. You can actually feel it taken from you. And it's to open up basically your meridians in your body so that you know your natural blood and oxygen is just flowing. It's all free to flow. And it's healing, because that's what our bodies are for. God has given us our own immunity system to heal, self-heal. And what we have to do is to believe in that, because you can't go to any of these therapies and not have any belief. You've got to really believe that you want to get better, make yourself better, and let this therapist or whoever to really support you with that. So yeah, I've gone back to Kim on a couple of occasions from time to time. It's having that cleansing and to feel like renewed again. Your battery pack has sort of been built up a little bit and you just feel cleansed.
How do you feel after spending an hour talking about your story? How does it feel for you right now?
Yeah, I am. At first I was a little bit nervous because, as you say, I've never done anything like this before. I've had counselling before and obviously shared things with Kim, but never to this sort of greatness, because it is like just telling my full story. And so I did feel nervous to begin with, I won't lie, but it's also like a relief, because I know that it's not just my story, it's everyone's who's gone through this trauma. It's their story. Doesn't matter how it's packaged, doesn't matter how it comes. We come through trauma unknowingly, because we don't recognise it as a child that it's trauma, but we feel unloved, we feel unworthy, we feel that we're trapped, we need to be saved. And I think if it's where God has led me, and God has led you as well, Donna and Kim, and you know, a lot more people out there to support and to help, it's about time that we turn the tail and say, you know what, you are loved, you are worthy, you know, it's your story, and where there is darkness, there is always light. I don't think it matters what age you are, you know, there is always some sort of outreach. You can get mended, you know, like the Japanese vase, the art of, is it?
Kintsugi, that's it, yeah, the one.
Yeah, the vessel that's broken, because we are broken vessels.
Yeah.
And how we build on that. And there's a little bit in my book as well about how I write about we are broken vessels, but we can be healed. The scars are still there, but with that golden thread, it's just so beautiful, because that makes us stronger. Our strength comes from that. We rebound back from it.
I love that.
So yeah, and I think, you know, whatever age, it's never too late. Like me, being 60, putting all this together, and if it's you know, it's helped me, it can help others. You're never too old to basically to heal.
I'm sure with regards to your health and how you're coming through that, and just the impacts of trauma and health, maybe there is another podcast we can talk about with that, or there's a lot of layers to your story, isn't there?
There's a lot of layers. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen, and I look forward to seeing you on Searching for Truth Uncovered, and I'll be back with another episode of Searching for Truth very soon.